Hello and welcome back to the channel. This is the second part of the video series on tRPC and Nuxt. In this video, we're going to split our routers so we can kind of have namespaces for different routers, and we're going to connect a database so we can start to save data and query data from a database.
Before we get to the code, please make sure you like, subscribe, share this video with your friends. Make sure you watch the other parts of the video. This is kind of a series. So let's get to it. Let's pull out this hello router or hello route and kind of into its own separate file. This is kind of a made up, example for you to leverage. So imagine you had kind of like different objects in your system. So you had like users and blog posts, right? You might want to create a separate route for users and a separate route for blog posts. So in here, we'll create a separate route for tests, and then we'll create a separate route for another object that we'll kind of use to kind of integrate with SQLite, our database. So in here, we're going to go to routers, and we're going to click, and we're going to call this test route. Does that make sense? Yeah, no, test router. And in test router, that will hold our test route, and then inside of here we'll also create, I think I'm going to use some code that I have from my other projects where I kind of save thoughts to a database. And so we'll create another file inside of here called thoughts or thought router. And then we'll go back to our index, and inside of our index, all we're going to do is let's take this hello procedure out. Let's take that out and let's put it in our test router. I'm just going to kind of put it here for safekeeping, but you can see I have some imports and some things that I need to kind of get this going. So the first is, of course, we need to import Zod, and we need to import this public procedure function. And then what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this into a router, and we're going to call it test router. And then now this router will kind of be nested inside of the primary router. So let's go over and go back to our index router. And then in here, we won't need this anymore. Then in here, we're going to just import that other router. I think it was called test router. And we'll be of type. Now the property will get passed in as test router. And so we don't need Zod here anymore because it's being used inside the routes. And so now this has our main router that will be exposed has, let's call it a namespace called test router. And then inside of that, it has the methods that are specific to the test router. And we can kind of do the exact same thing for now, just to keep it simple. We'll just copy the contents of test router, we'll put into thought. We'll change this to thought router. And let's change this to test thought. And we'll change this name to a thought. And then what I'll do is it will just display the thought. Change to my current thought. Okay, and then let's go back. Let's save this test router. Let's save our thought router. Let's go back to index. And then on here, we're going to add our thought. We get the import. And let's just call this thoughts. Not that, like that. Let's do it like this. And let's call this tests. And then now, if we go back to our app, we hop into our app, we get our tRPC client. And if you hover over this, you can see it has tests and thoughts. So to do our hello use query again, we would have to export, we'd have to destructure from our tRPC client tests. And then we could say, and then we get access to our query, and we can test that by going back here, and we can see, if I refresh, let me zoom this in. Our original test route is still working. And then let's also off of here, let's destructure out thoughts. We hadn't done thoughts before, so let's just copy, paste down here. We'll say thoughts, response, and we need to use our thoughts here. So let's just kind of remove all this. Thoughts, UGHTS dot, and then we have our test thought, and then it requires some parameters. I always do that first. Test thought dot use query And then the parameters are thought, and great, this is working. Save and format this, and go back to our app. And oh, I didn't put in the UI. So let's go up here and change this to thoughts, response. And let's go back to our app. And our thoughts are working. So that's kind of an example of how you kind of can break up your routes into separate namespaces so that you can kind of manage your API calls or queries effectively, still getting all the type safety and everything as you did in the basic application. Okay, we're back, and now let's kind of connect a database to all this. And so what we are going to do is, remember in the beginning when I spoke about how you can, in your context, have a way to pass specific things around. And so what we're going to do is, in our context, where did it go? Inside of here, we are going to create a database object, and we're going to pass that database object around to the API endpoint so that they can have access to the database to kind of save our thoughts. We created inside of our routers here, we created this thought router, and right now we just have kind of this dummy test thought, but what we'll do is we'll add a way to add thoughts and add a way to add a thought and a way to get a list of all the thoughts. All right, so let's first go to our context, and actually before we do that, we're going to use better SQLite. Better SQLite is a better SQLite client than a default SQLite client. It's asynchronous. It's pretty awesome. I'll include a link in the description below on SQLite. On better SQLite. So let's kind of cancel this running and let's install better SQLite to get us going. All right. So let's get this installed. All right, now it's installed. Let's get our server. Let's get our server running again. And now we're inside of our context. And we're going to make a slight change to this code. So I think we want to do this and do this. Oh, sorry. And then down here, specify what we want to return. All right, and then inside of here, we need to import the better SQLite client. So let's go up here to the top and let's import that. Oh, I haven't used my database yet. And then the next thing we want to do is we're going to create our database. And then we also want to be able to, we need a table to kind of hold everything. And so here's where we will create our table. And then we want to kind of execute this create table. And what that will do is I'm certain most of you are pretty familiar with SQL, but basically create a table if it doesn't exist. The table has an ID, it will auto increment. It has a thought field and a mood field. And if you remember, that our thought router will update our thought router for those specific types to get that going. So let's pop back over here. And so now what we will do is we will return our database. Okay, so now that that's done, if I go into my thought router and I come here, if I go down to input, and if I add context, and then let's just test this, I believe there's my database. So now I have access to my database inside of my query through my context, which is what I wanted. All right, so what am I gonna do next? Well, since everything's about TypeScript and being type safe, let's kind of add our type for our thought. So we'll add that up top here. Well, let's create our new endpoint. So we'll kind of copy this test thought as our baseline. For anyone who's watched my videos, you know I like to copy. I like to minimize my typing. I'm not like a keyboard jockey. You can kind of move around. I have to use keyboard and mouse. So we're going to now create a new function called add thought. And our thought requires a thought. And if we look at our type, it requires a thought and it requires a mood. And I'm not going to lie, I had to kind of look this up. So how you do it is you say Zod dot literal, and we're going to keep this simple, happy, and then you say or Zod dot literal, and I think I messed this up. I did. It has to be like this because they're all functions. Or literal sad, happy, sad, or literal. Sorry, I can't type. Z dot literal, happy, sad, angry. All right. So what this now will say is that when I create my thought, I have to pass a string parameter, a mood parameter, but the only acceptable values are happy, sad, or angry. Okay. And then what we're going to do is inside of here, now that we have our context, X, and then we have our database, we can, prepare. And we'll call this add thought. We'll add prepare. Let's do it that way. And then inside of here is where we actually write the SQL script that we want to execute. And so what we have here is we have our insert script, and we are going to insert into our thoughts table, and it requires a thought and a mood, and then these kind of colon dot colon mood are placeholders for the values that we want to insert. And then in the end, we will actually run that. And this add prepare I don't like. Let's do something else. Let's change this to insert thought. And then now finally what we want to do is actually run our prepare statement. But we need to kind of create this object, this new thought object. And so what we're going to actually, let's do that up top here. Well, hopefully kind of, let me finish typing this up. And so let's say const new thought equals, and let's make sure we leverage our types. So we'll say thought, and we're getting the error because our thought requires let's just do this for now. Okay, that's the weirdest because when on my insert I don't have an ID. So now we have thought, and we'll just pass our input, thought, and then our mood. And let's say as string. I think I have some typing wrong up top here. And what's this one complaining about? Oh. All right, there we go. I think it's this nullish thing. Where is it? We don't want this here. It has to be a string. So let's remove that. And so if I remove that, then I should not have to put as string there. Oh, because string can be null. So to make this string required, we can just say min 1. And so then now, why is it still doing that? Where am I going? Oh, I was up here editing I was editing the wrong one. So let me kind of change this, take it down, and update. This is not that one. This is the thought that I wanted to be modifying. My bad. Okay, there we go. Now, so I can't insert this object unless I have my thought and I have my mood. And we specified what the valid mood values are. Okay, and then now this is the type that we created to ensure that we have some type safety. This is how we should be able to successfully insert the object. Still trying to understand why this is shaped this way. But everything, no errors, so it's good. So now we can, I don't want to return this my current thought. Let's see, what am I going to get back from this thing when it runs? Context, DB, because the type of my DB is not coming through. Let's see if I can fix it. Let's see what's going on in my context. Looks like I got an error up here. Better SQLite. Oh, let me install these types. let's cancel this for a sec. It was installed. Error's gone. Let's get my server going again. And let's see if that resolves some of my issues. Format this. Let's see. Okay, this is looking better. Now I'm getting my insert thought, my prepare. I believe I can put my type in here. And let's see now. And then I run my new thought. And then let's see what this gives us back. And this is my database run result, and let's see what we get inside of there. Changes in last inserted row ID. So what we'll do is we'll just return here. Let's return an object of true and ID equal to last inserted row ID. All right, so this is how we should be able to insert a row into our database. Important things here are the access to the context, how we showed an example of how to control the information that was passed in a mood by creating these literals, almost like an enum, and let's say a literal. So it just forces a string to be happy, sad, or angry. And then we make sure that we have a string that gets passed in the minimum size of 1 for our thought. Actually, let's change this. We want our thought to at least be 10. Right? How can you express your thought in one letter? All right. We added our types with our thought and our new thought. We ensure our type safety. And now let's see how we would actually use this in our front end. So let's go to app.view and we're testing our queries. So before that's our test thought. Let's hop in here. Let's remove our test thought. And let's see, what is our function what's our API endpoint we added? We add thought. And then actually, my mistake, I missed one thing. This is not a query, it is a mutation. All right, so now let's go back here and add thought, mutate. You can see it's telling us what it needs for the inputs. And so we'll go down here, we'll say thought is I am in a good mood if this works. And then it requires a mood. And then if I hover over that, I can see it's looking for happy, sad, or angry. Those are the only acceptable options. So if I put in, see, it's getting the error because it's saying that the expected types come from mood, which can only be happy, sad, or angry. So happy. Now it accepts it. And this should give us our thought response, which should be the ID of the newly created object. So let's go up here and let's put in, it already has thought response there. So let's actually, all these times I'm saving it, it's probably been adding records. So let's go to our app and see what we got. Oh, we have null and null. Let's refresh, thoughts batch. That is not good. I realized that I made a mistake. So let's go back to our context. Where did it go? I was reviewing the documentation, and this is not the correct way to handle this import. Let's do our import this way. And now let's run our application and test it. So let's do a refresh. We can see our application's running fine. Let's go in to our, where is our app view? And let's add something new. I had a bug, and so I wasn't happy that I had an issue. I was sad that I had an issue. So now let's save that. Everything should be running. Let's check our browser again. Everything's fine with our browser. Hit refresh, so it's going to add a couple of records. But actually what we can do to see that things are really getting added, we can go up to our app view and we can see our thought responses here. And thought response data. It should be rendering something. Okay, so I'm logging. That's kind of small. So it's saying it was successful. You can see from the ID that I had, it got a lot of records, but why am I not seeing anything here in my output? Let's see, what mistake did I make? So we're in our app view. Oh, it looks like mutate doesn't return data. Should just be thought response. And now let's go, and now we get its if. Now we get it entered appropriately, and then now if I refresh, 8, so we can see it's definitely adding the records. And so let's just kind of wrap up this last part here, and we're going to stop adding records, and we are going to get all of the thoughts that we have saved already in the database. And we're actually, we can, did I do my list everything yet? So let's go back to my thought router, and I did not do a basic query. So let's create that now. Public procedure. And there's no input. We're just going to do a query. And the query, format this query. And we're just going to hop down here. And there's no input. So all I need out of this is the context. So just query. And then what we want to do is kind of the same idea here. We're going to create a prepare here to query all the thoughts that are in the database. And so that'll get all of our thoughts. Let's make sure we remember that this is in our context, ctx. And then we are using our type because we wanted to return an array of them. And then we're going to do the same way we did on the inserts, where we now need to execute or kind of run this prepared statement. So let's put that in. So that should give us all of our thoughts. And then just like we did down below, we need to return them all. So now we'll just do return thoughts. And so we should get our thoughts back now. And they should all be typed because you can see our types are there. And so now let's go back to app view. And this thoughts response we're going to leverage because we're going to just take this to get us started. Thoughts, get thoughts, use query, no params, and then log our thought response. So we can just save this and take a look at what we got up top. So let's go back to our app. You can see we have all of our thoughts that we've been saving. Let's kind of format that a bit. But here, let's return thoughts.data because that's what we really want. And then let's go up here and let's set this to pre. So we'll get a little bit of format on it. And let's go back to our app. And here are, well, let's refresh this. So I keep changing what I'm putting in the console log. Change this. This should be thought response data. And then now we get our thoughts. So we've showed how to add our thoughts and we showed how to list our thoughts. I think we'll wrap this up here. The next part will be to actually create a basic UI to kind of insert the thoughts instead of kind of doing it the way that we had done.